Yes, and we're on. This is our recording for this week with Steve Struggle and myself, Dr. Abrahim, on Here and Now. Weekly analysis of what is happening in the world today. Just incredible changes are moving along, and everyone's engaged. Both the revolutionary processes in various countries are engaged and the counter-revolutionary processes are underway as well. So let's start off with Steve's report here. And we need to know what's happening in Venezuela, Steve.
Well,
Is it true?
thank you for allowing me to share this information with you. Um, People who watch this program should already be aware that on January 3rd of this year, the United States government instituted a military operation to kidnap and detain in U.S. jails and prisons the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and the first combatant of Venezuela, his wife, Celia Flores. They had been detained in the United States for approximately 6 weeks, and they're being held on U.S. charges. Okay, now, since that time, some changes have come about in the Venezuelan oil sector. The proceeds from oil is what has been used to promote social programs to make more equal the lives of Venezuelans, workers, and the poor. That has been the essential emphasis of what is called the Bolivarian Revolution, started by Hugo Chavez in the late 90s and extended by Nicolas Maduro in the 2000s, 20s. The United States has implemented a number of over, let's say, investment in Venezuela and the export of Venezuelan oil, its own oil, using U.S. sanctions that are based on the use of the dollar as the currency. And the current government has passed a law since the abduction of President Maduro, not before he was abducted, that will change some of the structures of the hybrid, what they call the hydrocarbon law, which will allow or make easier more investments in Venezuela and reduce the money, well, and theoretically reduce the taxes or royalties that the companies had to pay to Venezuela for access to Venezuelan oil. Okay. So most people don't know what that means because they go to work, they got a job, they go home, and that's all, that's our lives. So what this means is that when a U.S. corporation wants to do business overseas or in another country, there are licenses that the U.S. has to give you to do this. Okay. And the Venezuelan law, the change in the hydrocarbon law, will make the proceeds from the investment in Venezuelan oil less for the government. But there's a problem here. This is a problem that hasn't been talked about in the U.S. press or even the left press too much, as I've seen.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything
This,
about the law. Nobody else is
I know,
reporting about
I
this.
know,
So
I
it's
know, I
interesting to
know.
know.
Yeah.
You digging this up.
So yeah, and we're gonna have to do another longer show on this because I do want to go into a little more detail. I think it's very important to understand how oppression works when it's not always by the gun. Even though the attack on Venezuela was
Mhm.
by the gun, also they're using financial means.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what happens. A company, Venezuela, a company gives Venezuela money through the hydrocarbons law from the production extraction of oil from the oil fields. But the money is not going to go to Venezuela. It's going to go some banks over some banks. Those banks in Qatar, I think, is going to hold the money.
Wow.
And that's where yeah, and this is where the USA will then determine what Venezuela gets of the money that the companies are paying it in royalties. The royalties are not, as I understand it, and I could be wrong here, and that's why we need to do a little more study. The money does not go directly to Venezuela because it's U.S. money. Now, listen to that again. It's U.S. money. So this is U.S. money. It goes to certain banks that handle U.S. money in trade.
Hmm.
And the banks have to make sure that the money is legally, there's no sanctions on the money, which there are. There are no restrictions on who gets the money, which there are. And then the bank can release the money. And as I understand it, the banks are not directly releasing it to Venezuela. Now I could be wrong about that. So that part I'm going to say I'm not sure about. But I do know that the money does not, or it's not like I have a hot dog, you buy the hot dog, I get the money. Or I have oil, you invest in the oil, I have a tax, I get the tax money. No, that's not how it works. It goes through some processing centers to get the money, and there can be disputes on what's going on. They go to some international bodies. Before there was no allowance of international settlement issues. Now with the Venezuelan law, there is. So the main problem, as I see it, really isn't the Venezuelan law. It is the fact that Venezuela does not get the money directly. Because of sanctions, the companies route the money that they give to Venezuela through a U.S. conduit, U.S. approved bank or U.S. approved money changing system, and then money changing system then either gives it to Venezuela or puts it somewhere until the U.S. releases it. That's what's happening. I could be a little off on some of that, but I think I have the thumbnail sketch correct. So this is
Hmm.
what's going on, everybody. This is
Hmm.
ridiculous. How does
Yeah.
how do you have sovereignty over your country when you can't get the proceeds from your sale of your and this is your raw resources? That's why people like the people in the Sahel and the alliance of Sahelian states have said no. We don't want our investments are our investments, and we'll do with them as they want. Even though Mali still has an issue with some uranium that they are wanting to export, but there's some international settlement agency and some dispute. So that's what's happening in Venezuela. Maduro is in jail in the United States with his wife, and after he got here, this law was introduced in Venezuela to make it easier, make it more profitable for companies to do business in Venezuela. Profitable meaning Venezuela will get less money from taxes and revenues that they impose on the profits from the oil drilling, but the money doesn't come direct to Venezuela. It's not like they just get the money. Like, okay, here it is. We put it in the Venezuelan bank. There's your payment, and now we're out of here. We're pumping our oil. No, the sanctions is what is the killer, and that's not talked about. As long as they're using U.S. dollars as
Hmm.
as the purchasing venue for purchasing tender for the oil for the right to drill and extract, then the U.S. government can say, well, our money is being used and we are sanctioning the use of our money, and you have to do it this way. We have a sanction on you. So Venezuela is still in a bad situation for us getting the money. And I think someone needs to be a little more honest about what's going on here. The
Hmm.
sanction is the issue. The hydrocarbon law clearly is eye opening. This is being done to attract investors, as I understand it. That's being done to attract oil companies, but the money that they will get does not come directly to them. It does not. They that, at this point, that's determined by the United States,
Hmm.
which is ridiculous. So again, my reading can be wrong. I'm gonna do more reading, make sure I get it correct, and I'll probably consult some experts in the field also to make sure next time I report on this is accurate. But I know this part is right. They they're trying to invest in they're quote unquote trying to invest people and encourage people to invest, and the U.S. is going to give them some licenses to avoid the sanction licenses to invest but to U.S. companies. But there's no rush. The U.S. companies don't want to really rush because they really want an end to the Chavismo government. They want a washed U.S. something like let's see, Ecuador. They want something like let me give another country something like Morocco. They want something that's going to be pliant to the U.S. directly and probably give nothing to Venezuela, and then they will get rid of the sanctions because you're not getting money anyway. But that's my
You're right
opinion.
on there. Can you show us the law and the some of the paragraphs that you've dug
Oh,
up
sure,
there?
sure, sure, sure. Give me a
Yeah,
second to get them up
because
here
I
because this
think
is really
I've heard about Exxon trying to muscle its way into the Venezuelan oil fields. Previously it was Chevron
right, right.
because
It actually
Chevron
still is Chevron.
agreed to a minority ownership of the oil exports. A majority of the revenue was going to Venezuela itself under that agreement with Chevron, another American company. Now, Exxon is muscling its way in and wants to have a majority control over the oil revenue that it's extracting from another country. But now, Venezuela is, one can say, financially occupied and
Yes.
dominated by not only the military imposition, the removal of the president, the subjugation of the government itself to American interests, and uh, also it's subjugated, in technology as well, because the oil refineries in Venezuela are non-functional. They haven't been maintained and they haven't been upgraded, like for decades. So the oil refineries are in Texas. So the United States, Chevron previously, now with Exxon, extract the oil, bring it to Texas, refine it, and then sell it, for who knows what, 5 times the original cost price. And the original cost price now, majority of that revenue stays with the American companies and not with Venezuela under the new regime.
Right. So this is an article. There's been times I have questioned this news site. It's called Venezuela VENEZUEL analysis, the Venezuela analysis, but it does have from the ground reporting, and we wouldn't have gotten this detail in the New York Times. No, you would not. It's not there. This article goes over many things about what the hydrocarbon law and the state's role in the energy section. What it means, the state's role, what it means is the money that the state gets from the private sector when it invests. That's what they're talking about. And basically, the article goes over um, she will be guided by the best international practices, undertake a historic leap forward. They talk about Hugo Chavez, and she claims that Maduro would have approved this. Who knows if that's true because he's in jail. The General License 46 authorizes the U.S. firms to purchase and market Venezuelan crude while demanding that the contracts be stripped to U.S. jurisdiction. See, this is
U.S.
it.
jurisdiction.
Look,
Oh,
look at this here. It bans transactions with Russia, Iran, North Korea, Cuba. Look at this. It's right in the
wow.
law. Right here, the law is banned. So
Whoa.
this is it right here. I'm showing it to you so you see it. You do not see this in the U.S. press. No, you don't. Okay.
And it forbids
Um,
anybody else from coming in to buy the oil in
it's
Venezuela. China is
essentially,
forbidden.
right,
Yeah.
right. From so this is a law. Why would you pass such a law unless the United States told you to pass such a law? You cannot say that. No, you cannot say Nicolas Maduro would have approved this. No,
No.
he was meeting with China the day he was abducted. I'm sorry, I can't comment on what's happening in Venezuela, but clearly the current president, the former president of Venezuela, because now there's an acting president, so there has to be a former president, would not have approved, would not have, he would have fought against this.
Yeah.
And that's why he was kidnapped. That's my opinion
Yeah.
based on what I see here. And this is what the law says. I'm showing it to you.
Hmm.
Also, as U.S. firm, it bars transactions with companies from Russia, Iran, North Korea, or Cuba. Concerning China, it only blocks dealings with Venezuelan joint ventures. And mostly the joint ventures, by the way.
Hmm.
Okay. Here, then it says it mandates that, excuse me, I'm sorry, that it mandates that payments to blocked agents, including the government, be made to U.S. foreign government deposit funds or another account defined by the U.S. Treasury Department. So U.S. Treasury is telling Venezuela where to put their money. Come on. Come on. Okay. What else am I saying? Yeah, this is yeah, I think that's it. These are key things to know.
Mm.
This to me is the key thing. You how this is astounding. You
Mm.
cannot tell me Nicolas Maduro would have approved this. Or if he was meeting with China before, okay, let me say it. I can't say what he would have approved. I can't say that because that's what he and the Venezuelan Socialist Party would decide, etc. But it would seem highly unlikely.
Wow. I'm reading this economist, Francisco Rodriguez, pointed out that the sanctions waiver does not explicitly allow for production or investment, and that companies would require an additional license before signing
Right?
contracts with Venezuelan authorities. Oh, that means,
And the license
uh,
comes from the United States.
yeah, it's not Venezuela, certainly,
No,
because it
no,
says there,
no.
in addition to, and before, signing with Venezuelan authorities.
Yeah.
Wow, they need a license from the United States to deal with Venezuela now. This is
And
financial
payments
occupation.
and the PDVSA is a Venezuelan oil government oil concern. Payments to it has to be made to a U.S. government foreign deposit funds. So this is what and how imperialism works, everybody.
Wow.
Okay, here's how it works.
Yeah.
It's like racism operates in a certain way. Sexism operates in a certain way. Here's how I'm going to here I'm going to tell you, you black worker, I don't like the way you come to a meeting. You don't sit properly. Yeah, some said reasons. Okay, okay. Or I don't like the way you move around your classroom or your or the workplace. This is racism. Or your skirt is kind of short and it's causing distraction to our employees. Or your hair doesn't look like a normal hair of one of our customers. That's racism and sexism. And here is business oppression. Since you're using U.S. currency and the U.S. firm is involved, we're gonna make sure the money comes to us. We'll release the money when we make sure it meets all the criteria. And the banks, this is what else we want to talk about, Abraham. The
Mhm.
banks are used as clearing houses. The banks. So they send the money to a certain bank, and then the bank has to clear the payment to Venezuela. A bank, the bank in Qatar. I think it's in Qatar.
Hmm.
So the bank acts as a clearinghouse to clear the money. And
Hmm.
and if anything is funky about the money, the how the money how the money is processed, how is there something funky about where it came from, blah 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 blah, then the bank can say, I'm not giving you the money, the person who bought it, or I'm not giving Venezuela the money. It looks like some funky transactions here. We have to clear this.
Uh,
Yeah.
that this is much like the gold reserves of Libya were taken over by the 20 billion in New York, another 20
Yeah.
billion in Canada, another 15 billion in Switzerland.
Yeah. Yeah, this is
And
the
the
gold.
same thing
Yeah, the
happened
gold.
to
Yeah,
Iraq. And uh, this is the whole financial system is being
yes,
weaponized.
yes,
Like it's like a financial
yes.
war. There's like a world war happening, but at the level of finances. It's and
Right.
occasionally breaking out into violent suppression of any opposing uh, um, arrangements. Like with China. I think it's China's entry into Venezuela. That has really upset the United
Yeah,
States
yeah.
so much. Yeah,
So
that's what.
here's how the here's a little flow sheet I created on how it goes. Legal permission to 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 have the money. Contract terms where you got the money. Payment initiation. Then the clearing. It's called the clearing. The correspondent clearing. That's where the banks get involved in compliance, restriction, holding the money, conditional releasing, and then it comes to the government. So it has to go through at least one, two, three, four, five, six steps before it gets to the Venezuelan government. Anywhere in that process, really, let's say payment, correspondent clearing, compliance review, restricted escrow holding, conditional release. Any one
Wow.
of those five areas, it can be stopped.
Yeah.
They don't get the money, and you're
Wow.
not going to see this is not in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Left Review. Here's
Yeah.
how it works, everybody.
Yeah.
Here's the steps. So anywhere along this line, let's say a payment to usable cash. There's one, two, three, four other steps they have to go through to get their money. And the
Yeah.
United States sets this up because they use U.S. currency and U.S. companies to control how people get the money from. So it's not just resource extraction, but also impeding you from getting the money from the resources that we have extracted. Yeah, so it's
Mm.
actually theft.
Hmm. So this enables the United States to prevent Venezuela from changing this relationship. So if they
Yes,
try to sort of, set up another contract with a Chinese company, then the revenue
so they'll
is
have to do
withheld.
it in
Is withheld.
Chinese money. They'll have to do it in Chinese money, and this is where BRICS. This is where BRICS could come in, though.
Yeah.
If they had contracts through another clearing agency for the money, the U.S. could be out of the picture totally. It probably wouldn't be a U.S. company doing it. But if I have, and if you see, if as I understand it, again, my understanding could be flawed or maybe not totally correct. If BRICS or some other agency can say you can transfer your payments through us using Ruan or Bolivarian money, whatever, and just avoid the whole U.S. system. That's what they have to do, and that's
Yeah.
also a chart I have here. I did some game theory, and
Mhm.
they basically were saying that that is an option that might take longer for Venezuela to get their money, but that's an option to use other currency and other correspondent clearing systems to get the money.
You have an alternative flow chart there?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it here. Hold on a
That's
second.
this is that's why the standardization of an international currency as the American dollar is crucial to maintaining the American hegemony in the world,
Right,
and that's
that's
why
it.
BRICS is so important. And although BRICS has prepared alternative currency and alternative bank
Right.
transfer mechanisms other than SWIFT. China's already set up an alternative bank transfer system that could be used. That's set up already. And I guess this is why Libya was put down because Gaddafi was preparing an alternative African currency based upon a gold standard. And soon after that, Gaddafi was disappeared.
Yeah, he would disappear very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so here. Let me just show you this chart I did. Okay, so here's a chart. This is what they call a risk matrix chart. I got it here. Let's see if I can get it on here. Let's see if I can get it here. Yeah, I got it. Good. All right. So here's a risk matrix chart, and it shows um, how different possible ways this all can work. And the one we were talking about here, this is the scenarios. In this scenario, what would happen, or the probability of it happening now, based on what's going on here. And here's where we are now. You have controlled re-engagement and restricted access to the money. Access to the money is called liquidity. That's what that word means. Access to money.
Ah.
So with the increase with the new law, let's say there's more oil being pumped, but proceeds are routed through restrictive custody escrow-like channels. Usable state cash grows slowly. There's more cash, but it's not directly cut in. That the way it's set up now, that's what's gonna happen.
Hmm.
Okay, there's gonna be the probability is high, the impact's gonna be high, and the licensing constraints, bank de-risking, U.S. clearance. It has to go through U.S. dollar clearance. So longer settlement times, more restricted account use, stable exports, possible but weak financial liquidity. Venezuela gets very little money in this process. So this is some other options. But the one I talked about earlier was here non-U.S. settlement. Okay,
Hmm.
if if Venezuela and partners shift to non-U.S. dollars and alternative banks, improving the money that they'll get. The way it's set up now, this is that's not going to happen right now because not the structure isn't set up. But it increases increasing regional bilateral payment systems, state-to-state agreements. That's what I'm talking about. That's how they can get out of this. They have to do something like this, which
Yeah.
would increase non-U.S. dollars, reduce the use of the dollars, and growth in alternative clearing systems. That's where BRICS other things come in, right there. So that's how it could work.
Yeah.
Even with the current investment, no one can stop a company from investing in Venezuela. No, the U.S. can't stop that. But if you're using dollars to in your transaction, they can say, well, we have an imposition of use of our money. So this, to me, number five is the way to go. If they're
Yeah.
really trying to be Bolivarian, you got to get out of this system. To say this is good,
Yeah.
no, this is not good what they're in, and it's not
Hmm.
their fault they're in it. But you can, I would argue, if you want sovereignty, you have to look for other out because how can you have an industry where someone else determines what money you get
Hmm.
from the extraction of your raw materials? It's your raw materials, and you
Yeah.
cannot control the what when you get your money. Oh no, 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 we can't have any of that.
Yeah.
So
But Venezuela is not part of BRICS. It was
no,
blocked
it was
by being
blocked
from
by
being a member of BRICS
our
by
good
Brazil.
freaking backstabbing friend, our backstabbing friend Lula. What a
Uh,
backstabber! Come
yeah.
on, come on. Who is Lula serving?
Yeah.
Come on now. Who is Lula serving? I'm not saying this would have been over if they had been in BRICS, but at least one foot would have been in the door. Okay, so anyways, just here's some game. And what game theory? We'll go over this some more, but this is Val because this is an interesting thing we did here. But the point
Hmm.
is that Venezuela is in a bad situation. It's been a bad situation for a long time with the economic sanctions.
Yeah.
But the key was seizing Maduro. He clearly represented somebody that the U.S. and potentially Venezuelan right wingers wanted to get rid of to get more investment in the country. But the stupidity of that view is, did you get an agreement on the sanctions? If you're going to backstab or be a fifth column, What about the sanctions? Of course, the sanctions are still there. They've
Mm.
gone nowhere. They set
Oh,
up worse sanctions because now we take the profits from. We'll make sure we will monitor how you get your money. Come on, man.
yeah.
The United
Uh-huh.
States sucks. U.S.
Yeah.
imperialism is not just a vulture and a gold digger, but they believe in strangling the life of a country.
Mhm.
It's no
So
good.
President Maduro has been removed. He would have been opposing this new
Of
contractual
course.
arrangement with the United States
Oh,
for sure.
I mean, to say you can't sell oil to Iran, North Korea, China. I mean, what? Russia, Cuba?
Yeah.
What? That's in the law.
Uh,
That is not a how is that good? A good law?
yeah.
How
But
is
I
that
hear
a
that
good?
Scheinbaum, the prime minister or the president of Mexico, is helping out Cuba with food aid, but
Right? Not
not
oil.
with oil. Yeah, Mexico is holding back on defying the United States, to that extent. But they are helping out on a humanitarian basis, which they figure they can get away with without being subject to reprisals from the United States.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I hope
Scheinbaum,
that beginning.
Scheinbaum has two ancestors, two relatives, who were part of the initial force of Castro that went into Cuba and carried out the revolution there. Two of her relatives were part of that brigade there. Incredible. But she seems to be holding back on that revolutionary
Oh, she,
potential in Mexico.
well, she is. I mean, she
Yeah.
at this point. I mean, at this point, okay. All I can say is I don't have a country to run. I don't have a military to, arm. I don't have, schools to fund. I don't have that. So I quote unquote understand your situation politically. However, the bully has told you you better not do something, and you are succumbing to the threats of the bully. That I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Mm.
And how much is your sovereignty worth to you, or how much do you really value and hold dear the independence of Mexico, which is what they all talk about. And I'm not dissing what they talk about. They talk about the independence of Mexico and every every boy must be a soldier. That's part of the national anthem.
Mm.
And our land is cannot be soiled, etc. And I'm not knocking any of the ethos of the government, but that's what you say. So since you say that, how does this behavior match? Or are you just overmatching? You just can't do nothing. If so, just say
Yeah.
that we're overmatched. We can't fight back now. Here's all we can do. Just
Yeah.
say that, and then at least you're saying we have our sovereignty, yet we have no way of enforcing it right now. So I mean, just be honest with the world,
Yeah.
because you could sell them so well. Yes, you could. Are you willing to accept the consequences? And apparently, no. Not
Hmm.
right now. You're not, because the oil could be sold. Now, the U.S. might try and seize the oil, but how would they know if you just put it on the boat and just take off? It ain't that far from Mexico to Cuba. No, it ain't. It ain't that far at all.
Hmm.
Was it like a 90-minute flight, maybe? If it's that far.
Hmm.
So I don't know about oil, but you could do it. You could do it. Just do it and take a dare, get the oil tanker filled up, fly it under some other false flag, and get it over there. You could
Hmm.
do it if you really wanted to do. You could, at least one time you could try it. And
Yeah.
then go to the United Nations and make a speech saying U.S. has no right, and do the transaction not in U.S. currency.
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't use the transaction in U.S. currency. Use it in some other currency. Use it in pesos.
Hmm.
Try that. I'm just giving some ideas because there's got to be ways around this thing.
Yeah. But they're not trying. They're submitting.
Right.
The government,
They're not trying.
Venezuela has collapsed. So, and
There's
that's
some,
not
yeah,
just the
some,
truth.
yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to increase their popular support by doing so. So they could be overturned, by any opposition that says that they're willing to play the game with the United States and get the best deal possible, and they can convince the population to vote for them on that basis alone. This is very
Well,
this
I
is
would
very
I would
problematic.
call on the real Mexican revolutionists to consider that option because right
Yeah,
now, I mean, at least, and maybe some are. What's one of the things that I've noticed about the Mexico-U.S. international connections, and I'm not dissing. I just we don't know a lot about the opposite, the left forces, the revolutionary forces, the real patriot forces in Mexico. These I don't know a lot about them. Do you?
no, no,
Yeah,
haven't
we don't
heard
really
anything
know.
about them.
We don't know.
Yeah,
We don't know. And there, yeah, it just bothers me that it seems to be so difficult to get information. It shouldn't be. We have
yeah,
the internet. You have people from Mexico going all over the world. They're in the United States. They're in Europe. They're in South America. They're in Canada. We should know more, but we don't. So we'll have to find out more.
yeah,
That's all. So I hope this is of some help to our viewers to understand about the new law. And we showed you the law. We
yeah.
showed you aspects of the law. And next week, I could do more analysis of some of the criticism of the law from the Venezuelan nationalist perspective. There's some commentaries I'd like to share in our next show. Okay.
Yes. I'd like to draw the parallel here, with Libya, because in the same way that Maduro has been removed in order to facilitate this financial occupation of Venezuela, same thing happened in Libya, not only with the Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi, when he was assassinated. At the same time, that he was planning to establish a unified African currency and the African Union unification of the continent, with a financial mechanism, uh, with a currency based upon its reserve of gold, a gold-based currency, which is much more stable than the American dollar, which is based upon nothing. So, Gaddafi was removed at that time, and I have some illustrations, from that period to show you as well. But this week, the same thing happened again because it was possible for Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi, the son of Gaddafi, to become the president of Libya in a resurgence of the Jamahiriya, of the revolutionary potential of Libya. But he was the popular choice for presidency, in the preparations for the elections that were supposed to have taken place. But the elections were canceled. Uh, guess by whom? Somehow, somewhere, that happened. And this week, unfortunately, Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi was assassinated as well because he was on his way back to become the president of Libya. And the CIA, the military intelligence six of the United Kingdom and France probably moved in there, to do a joint operation and got rid of Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi in the same way that his father was removed because of the revolutionary potential on the financial scale. Just, Gaddafi himself, he tried to sort of make an accommodation with the United States. He even sort of handed over all the equipment that was being used for nuclear enrichment
Oh,
in
boy,
Libya.
was that ever a
Handed
mistake?
over
Was that
all the
ever a
equipment,
mistake?
as a show of good faith, that
Oh,
Libya
no,
didn't have any
no,
hostile intentions, etc.
no,
It got
no.
smashed anyway. It's
Well,
there's no
we
way to
don't.
negotiate, with imperialism. Imperialism couldn't care less, for any good faith negotiations. It doesn't work.
Well, I think that this is where the humanity of the freedom fighter sometimes this is where the humanity of the freedom fighter gets in the way of clear thinking when you're dealing with the enemy. We can show compassion to the oppressed, to the worker, to the peasant, to the woman, to the disabled, to the imprisoned, because those are the ones that are feeling the lash of the whip of the oppressor. But we have to be careful when we're dealing with the enemy. Compassion to the enemy is not smart because they're the enemy. I understand we have that problem because we're humans, we're humanists, we're
Yeah.
for the benefit, we're for a new world that benefits all of humanity, and but at the same time they're enemies of humanity. And when we deal with them, we have to take on kind of like a godlike punishment or approach to them that no, you're wrong. I have to punish you. And it's hard, but we have to be hard and giving up. I'm sorry, and Brother Gaddafi was viciously murdered. His country was destroyed. It's still not the same. It still isn't even close to what it was.
Yeah.
And I understand his brotherhood and his desire to do the right thing. I do. And we've all been in a situation where we've done the wrong thing with the enemy. No, the enemy is the enemy, and don't trust him in any way. If you trust him even 1 millimeter, if you even trust him 1 centimeter, that's a trust that is foolishly being given. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
just.
Yeah. And the left has, fallen for this, imperialist propaganda. Yeah. In the email list, Mark's Mail, which is about 600 North American Trotskyists, who are congregated there. There's one of them, who even sort of, put out a comment, calling Gaddafi dictatorship, saying that Libya was living under dictatorship. Like if Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, just the son, has so much popular support that he become president, evidently, Gaddafi himself was a popular leader of Libya at that time. And like the much is made of the lack of general elections that would have taken place in Libya, but they had a different system called the Jamaria, collective society, in which civil society was organized on the basis of revolutionary committees, and each group of people who had an affinity to work together formed a revolutionary committee on their own that was autonomous from any centralized authority. So it was a decentralized, political administration that would advise the government and would take initiatives on its own. Is the Revolutionary Committee movement, but it's not known. Not even the left knows that there was such a movement. It was not a party with, a dictated program with one leader. No, Gaddafi wasn't, a dictator. It was, a movement called the Jamaria in Arabic, meaning collective society, with all these revolutionary committees running around, doing stuff. And that's not mentioned, not by the left and not by the reactionaries either. And the left, like is so reactionary when it comes, to these, areas of thought that I'm so disappointed in the Occidental, world's leftist tendencies, which have made so many errors, and in particular the Comintern, which was used as an instrument, to back up the bureaucracy in the Soviet Union at the time, and not for the purpose of international revolutionary movements. All the communist parties and all their members, making excuses, for the failures of, a centralized authority of that time was, one of the impediments, to the international revolutionary movement. Now that impediment doesn't exist anymore. But the Soviet Union was also backing up all the ex-colonies, to prevent, them from being recolonized, by imperialism. Now that impediment doesn't exist, in spite of the fact that it had its reactionary attributes. So we're into revolutionary struggles, but easily suppressed by the United States at this time. And what we need is a collective revolutionary struggles, not divided into various countries, but together in a BRICS formation, in a international revolutionary movement is what we need, to back up each revolution so it doesn't get isolated one from the other.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. You need some kind of confederation of these nations.
Yeah,
If there's nothing like that, you're gonna get picked off. You're gonna
yeah,
get picked off. At least the weaker ones will get picked off.
yeah,
Okay. So that's why, in my view, North Korea was very keen to sign a mutual defense pact with Russia and put
Hmm.
its soldiers on the line in Ukraine. Okay,
Yeah.
we've done our part. Now it's your part, brother. Okay, that's
Yeah.
what they did. Look, they knew. Okay, we can get this right now. We're not in a good position. We want to be independent, but we got to make some alliances. And then some other alliances. We're talking about other alliances can be made.
Yeah.
Economic alliances, cultural alliances. That it becomes one collective whole. That's what you got to have. If not, you'll get picked off, man. You're gonna get
Yeah.
picked off, man.
Yeah.
That's what they
And the
do.
reason why North Korea wasn't picked off, was because it was backed by China. In the initial civil war in Korea in the
Right,
50s.
right, right.
There was,
They had backup,
yeah.
and it seemed at least militarily in Venezuela, the backup they had wasn't sufficient, at least
Yeah.
militarily, to come in
Yeah.
like that. Okay, that's all I'm saying. You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the oil, but the hydrocarbons law, you cannot sell to Iran. Who would write such a law? Who you can't sell to? Oh,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
on, come on. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, you're stabbing those countries in the back.
Yeah.
And the United States controls how you get your money through the settlement system. Oh no. More
Yeah.
power to the Alliance of Sahel states right now. More power to North Korea. More power to countries that at least trying to get out of this system here. Because it is definitely a death grip system that's not
Yeah.
serving humanity.
Yeah.
We deserve a better way to live. Yes, we
Well,
do.
China could have backed up Venezuela more so. China could have had a military base, in Venezuela, to prevent, the occupation. But China doesn't do that sort of thing. China's not into international revolution, although China does help out the countries in its periphery because they don't want, to be surrounded. Okay, so they're going to back up, the country like North Korea, because if United States, had a military base, in that territory, it would be right on the border with China, and China's not going to allow that. Okay, so they back up North Korea. So they're backing up North Korea, for the sake of its own security, but not for the sake of the international revolution. That's the limitations of the Chinese government at this time. So, that's a criticism that can be made of China in that way. But here I have the some of the products, the some of the cultural expressions of the Libyan revolution, Jamaria. Here is some stamps with Gaddafi plastered all over the place. He loved having his photo all over the place. In the hotel that we stayed at, the Hilton Hotel, formerly Hilton Hotel, that was nationalized, had the big H, in the bottom of the swimming pool and all that. But as you go in there, on the wall in the foyer, is this huge portrait of Gaddafi. So he was, into himself as an individual to an extent that exceeded the Libyan revolution. I think, he could have, been more international and less, egotistical about it all. That was one of his failings. And he used to make bombastic speeches that were used, in propaganda, claiming that he was going to carry out a genocide of the Libyan people themselves. But that never happened. So, it was a false flag, um, accusation, slander that was made against Gaddafi that was used to destroy him. And there was also a false accusation made against Libya I was there, at the conference, International Solidarity Conference um, uh, it was 98, I think it was. And I had invited a delegation from Canada and Quebec. I was the organizer here. And when we came there, we had a journalist from Ottawa who was of German family origin. And when there was a scandal that erupted because of some fascists that were invited from Argentina, and the whole conference collapsed, and there was a big debate about expelling them. And we did. We took over the conference in direct democracy. We debated whether or not to expel the fascists there, and we finally decided to do so. And Libya actually accepted our decision and removed those fascists from the conference, even though they were invited by some Libyan operative, in Argentina. So
Oh,
Libya was a Jamaria, and we carried out, the direct democracy in place there at the conference, at an international conference. So it wasn't a dictatorship. We were able to take control of the conference. And in fact, the Black Panthers who were there at the conference, made sure that they were expelled. Otherwise, there would have been an alternative procedure to have been followed at that point. But Libya went along with the conference decision. So, and here's the same stamp collection with the centerpiece, this gold sort of facsimile of Gaddafi riding a horse, which is a very Arabic, iconic, symbol. Now,
well,
next.
it just seems that a lot of revolutions, like it or not, again, like it or not, seem to make the iconography of the leader a central part of its propaganda. That's what
Yeah,
it seems to me. That's what it just seems to be. I can't.
yeah,
That's all I can say. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So it's unfortunate, that there's this, this form of cult of leadership that was initially built up around Stalin, but is used in other instances as well in place of the program, in place of glorifying the program and the actual political process. Here's another image from Libya. This is Libya in the Middle Ages when Europe was like wood burning, primitive culture. And here's the Orient. And here's Libya. This is civilization, the origin of civilization. And yet Europe comes along and says that it's superior and takes over everything that it
Oh,
can.
Europe, man, Europe can take a hike. I mean, that's there. I
Yeah,
mean that whole Eurocentric center of the world needs to kind of go. It needs to go somewhere. I'm sorry. It's
yeah.
just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just
Even
ridiculous.
the Greek philosophical culture was not preserved by Europe. Europe had no sort of, like knowledge or affinity, to Greece. Greece was part of the Orient, and the Oriental culture of Greece, in terms of political philosophy, was preserved by the Orient and brought back into Europe, by the Jewish population that maintained its connection, with the Orient. And that's how Aristotle came to be known in Europe. Otherwise, Europe couldn't care less. Okay, oh yeah, here's a nice, a better view of the stamp collection. And you can see the figure in the center there. Here it is. This is Gaddafi. Very strong personality. I met him, I spoke with him, and he was actually very humble when it came to sort of meeting other people, who were also revolutionaries. He was differential. He wasn't, like sort of, a madman as depicted. No, he was intellectually developed. He was respectful of others in the revolutionary movement, and he sought to uh, project the Libyan Jamahiri revolution throughout Africa on behalf of the unity and the independence of Africa. And he was also into international revolution, which is why I was invited to Libya in 1973 to speak about the Jewish anti-Zionist perspective, which was unknown at the time. And the Jewish anti-Zionist perspective was picked up by Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, who worked on the project of the White Book, which is an alternative to the British White Book, which was the colonial occupation of Palestine. And he was projecting how the Palestinians and the Israelis could find an accommodation with one another in a binational society. And this was put forward, with research, by Gaddafi and his son in that work, which followed through on the initiative that I had brought there. I had to get through the embargo on travel to Libya at the time. I had to go from Rome to Tunisia, Carthage, from Carthage to another plane to propeller plane, old plane, but it still worked, to Jerba, where there's a Jewish community still, and a synagogue that is protected by the government. And there I took a taxi to the border, and I had to wait there to announce, that I had made it, to the border at least of Libya. And the police, came from Tripoli, picked me up, and brought me back to Tripoli to the conference. That's how I was
Wow.
able to break through the
Wow.
embargo to get into
Wow.
Libya 73. Yeah.
Wow. I hope everybody followed those steps there. You really
Yeah.
wanted to go to that conference. You
Oh,
had,
yeah.
if you didn't want to go, you wouldn't have gotten there. No
No,
way.
yeah, no, I had to get there, because, this is a tremendous opportunity to present, the Jewish anti-Zionist position. And it was very well respected and accepted and adopted and propagated, and embellished by, the White Book work as well. And that's what's called Israelite. The concept, of Israel and Palestine together, was it was given the title of Israelite. And some of the leftists, tried to ridicule this. At the conference in London that was established by the One State Group, they didn't want to allow a Libyan delegation to come in the first place. They would
Why?
forbid it. Because
Why?
they wanted to be the leaders, of the one state group. The leaders, wanted to maintain their leadership, and they didn't want to have anybody else, who could be a leader, like of that thought process. So I invited the Libyans onto my personal delegation, and they couldn't, forbid me from coming because, I was, one of the first Jewish anti-Zionists in the world. And so they had to allow Libyan delegation to come in, and we handed out the white book, to the other delegates. And when I asked Gada Karma, you know, if she could conceive, of a binational composition of a unified, Palestine in the one state group, but binational, and she said no, she refused, and in a very sort of, haughty manner as well. So, like Libya had this contribution to make, but the leftists refused to accept the contribution that Libya had created, you know, on its own. Uh, Very, very bad,
Well,
it
you
was
have to just
so
you have to go
sectarian.
with what you can get, man. Obviously, those
Yeah,
weren't people to work with, and we got to make new alliances. That's what we have
yeah,
to do.
yeah, yeah. And also, a lot of the ex-CPers, went into the one state group, before the CP, was pro-Zionist. They were talking about, maybe they were talking about two-state solution, but they were talking about preserving the Zionist state in the first place as such. And
Oh
those
man.
ex-CPers are into the one state group, and they're supporting the idea of a unified democratic state. They're into sort of liberal democracy. These ex-CPers. And what's wrong with that? The problem is, that how would the Palestinian refugees, get back to Palestine if it was, some sort of, like arrangement of that sort, in which the Zionists, would have practically majoritarian control over any sort of legislative process because they would have the means to do so. So, they would certainly oppose any right of return of the Palestinian refugees. So one state group, like is not sufficient. It is not, the way to go because it doesn't accomplish, Palestinian liberation. And the leftists, they don't realize this. They don't even think about this. They think, oh, one state group, sounds good, and they jump on it, without thinking. No, it's got to be, it's got to be, like more profound than that. Okay, next image I have. Here's another stamp of Gaddafi with a technology in the background, showing the development.
Or a space station. Oh my God. A satellite.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Look at that.
yeah. Yeah,
Look how advanced that was.
yes. I think Libya, established a satellite for communications, for cellular communications in Africa to unify Africa. That was one of the initiatives, that was used, to achieve the unification of Africa. Yeah. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Here's a better view. Yeah, there's the satellite and all the other technological advances achieved by Libya. Hmm.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible. And that's why it was vilified in such a way, because whenever your enemy wants to vilify you, they take the great work that you do and they demonize it because it's
yeah,
work that they can't do. work that they're jealous of, work that your scientists and your educators and your peasants and your farmers have developed and your merchants have developed to make things more advanced. They'll take it and demonize it and steal it. They'll steal it later and make you think that make it look like history you did nothing. Yep, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
Oh, Libya. I love Libya. You know, one of the things that I was negotiating with Libya, at the in the latter period, just before Gaddafi was assassinated, was there's this group of the Jewish anti-Zionists, who are Orthodox, very Orthodox, and they were being harassed and persecuted, and their children were being taken away from them because they wanted to turn them into Zionists. And so this group called Left Tahor left Quebec and went to Ontario to try to escape from the child agencies, which had some Zionist operatives in there who were using that child protection agency to try to get control over the children in that community, to destroy it, to take away the next generation, and take the children away from the parents and send them to like grandparents living in Israel or something like that. So they were suffering again, under the Ontario legislature, which is trying to do the same to them there in Ontario, Canada. So they left and they went to Guatemala. And in Guatemala, they also got harassed. And so they left Guatemala again, for Mexico. And same thing, they got harassed there too. So then they went to some other countries. But at that point, I tried to intervene for them to find them a place, of security in Libya. And Libya agreed. Libya agreed to give them the site for establishing a Jewish village on the shore of the Mediterranean, just outside of Tripoli. And, all 60 members of this community, were invited to come and live there. I had a list, I sent it in, and it was in the process of being approved. And then, this whole village would have been built by Libya. They would have been given, the accommodation, of a home and land and a way to live, and the freedom to express themselves as they wished, as Jewish non-Zionists. And then the Civil War started, and all that project crashed. So, we could have set up an alternative, to the Zionist, scheme of things, in which they claim to be, working to set up a Jewish homeland. And when actually, they're setting up, a colony sponsored by, some imperial power for which they would become the agents of and seeking, power for itself and on behalf of the imperial power at the same time. I had this alternative set up with Libya, and there could have been, this Jewish village which could have been expanded and which could have been the basis for other Jewish people to go and live there if they wished as an alternative to Zionism, so that the Jewish Arabs living in Israel under discrimination, under Zionist Ashkenazi apartheid, because the white Zionists from Europe, well, more white, were treating the Jewish Arabs as a lower working class, as cheap labor, not as cheap as the Palestinians, but nonetheless cheap labor, and certainly not in the administration, which was reserved, for the Ashkenazim from Europe. So, those Jewish Arabs, who were being uh, manipulated, in the Zionist project, they could have found, like a home in Libya. That would have been exemplary. But no, all that was destroyed as well.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. Well, you know what? This history that you're sharing, Abraham, is so impressive, and it shows us that the desire to have a better world, world where you have respect for humanity, respect for culture, respect for the needs of the development of technology, is possible. And it was done. It was done. What you show me, the reason we should really embrace the Gaddafi era in Libya. We should
yeah,
embrace it as something that was progressive and good. Because look at the images you have here. That just didn't come from somebody sitting at a desk. They came from active work and having a vision for a future. Thank you
yeah,
for sharing that. It's very
yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah. Because once it's been achieved, it becomes an example, a precedent, a historical precedent. And so it could
Right.
be looked forward to, as an example of how it was done and how it could be done again. So,
Right.
this would,
How it could be done again. Exactly.
yeah, so
Yeah.
this, would
Exactly.
help to convince people that they should, make the effort to do so, because the reason why there's, a lack of a revolutionary achievements is because people don't believe it's possible. They think they have to accommodate themselves to whatever's,
Yeah.
on the ground, and the here and now. But the here and now, like includes, the preparations for a revolutionary transformation, if people believe it's possible. If they don't believe it's
Yeah.
possible, they won't do it. It's as simple as that.
Right. No, it's just as simple as that. You're right. You're exactly right. If they don't believe it's possible or don't believe the potential exists,
Yeah,
then they're not going to try.
yeah,
They have to have that. What it's a often misused and overused phrase. You have to have the growth mindset to know it's possible if we establish a foundation, build slowly with determination, with the capacity to make it happen. If we don't try, it won't happen. If you do try, it might happen. You have a
yeah,
better chance of success if you make the effort than if you don't make the effort. If you don't make the
yeah,
effort, there won't be success. No, that's right. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. When you're out in a demonstration, with 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 other people, then you get the feeling, then you get the sort of, the image of the potential of a revolutionary transformation because you
Yes,
agree with everybody
yes,
else and you can see
yes.
everybody else, like agrees with you. You agree with everybody else, you've got the collective consciousness there and you say, wow, we are powerful. We can do whatever we want. This is where democracy lives, in the street, amongst the people. And then, you get the feeling, that feeling, of revolutionary transformation, and then it could work. That's why these mobilizations are the pre-revolutionary conditions, required to convince people of their potential to achieve the revolutionary transformation. In the United States, it's happening now, like when you have, No King's Day, another No King's Day, and you have 7 million people out in the street and everybody knows it. And then the counter-revolutionaries, MAGA people try to sort of, pull off some kind of a mobilization, and then they fail, and then the comparative, numbers, of people who watch the Super Bowl mid-game, whatever it's called, like presentation, that was very Hispanic. That, like was much bigger phenomena than the alternative, MAGA sort of entertainment, at the time. And, that determines, the revolutionary potential. But if the people don't pick up that potential and use it, then they will be suppressed, because that potential exists. And therefore, the counter-revolutionaries have to suppress it and destroy it in order to preserve their own power, because they know that their power is waning, that they're going to lose it all, if they allow the revolutionary movement to continue to grow. So they are into, like suppressing it. But can they get away with it? No. Look what's happened, in Minnesota, Minneapolis. ICE is retreating there. They've been pulled out. And if that can happen in one state, then any other state can do the same, right? And they can get rid of ICE in that way, piece by piece. Well, at least that's, like the way, like I look at things, and I always try to look at, things, the revolutionary potential in an optimistic manner, because I can feel it. I can feel, that this potential exists and can grow. But when it's not picked up and not uh, built, then it fails. Like, you have certain opportunities, certain times, the revolutionary potential increases. And then you have to jump on it and you have to sort of, make it work and you have to sort of, pass it on to other people in other countries. But when that's not done, then it will subside. It doesn't stay there. It doesn't revolutionary potential and consciousness doesn't sort of, exist as a material entity, that remains in place. It has to be nurtured, it has to be fed, otherwise it will, disappear. And that's what happened in Germany, with the rise of the Nazis, which tried to replace the workers' revolutionary movements and called themselves, socialists and the workers' movement. And they were there, in order to steal the revolutionary potential in the working class away from the socialist currents. And the socialist currents, both the communists and the socialists, were busy, fighting each other rather than fighting the Nazis. And so they both got, eliminated in Dachau, the first, concentration camp, death camp. Who was sent there, first of all? Communists, socialists, handicapped people, and then, Jewish people who formed a revolutionary base of opposition because of the alienation under anti-Semitism. And so they tended to support the revolutionary currents, more so than any other social formation. And so they were eliminated because they posed a revolutionary potential. And then they went and did the same thing in every other country that they occupied. And when they came both, and then what did the Soviet Union do? In the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, they gave half of Poland, to the Nazis. They said, "Okay, you can occupy half of Poland, and we'll occupy the other half of Poland." With no consideration whatsoever, for my Jewish families that were living there in Poland. They just, allowed the Nazis to come in there, So, all the Jewish people started to sort of try to find ways to escape, but most of the Jewish people were poor and they couldn't, like even go on a trip, within Poland, let alone, outside of Poland to some other country, that didn't necessarily accept them. So the revolutionary potential, was destroyed because of the mistakes, by the various, socialist and communist currents at the time. And such mistakes, have been repeated, with like the lack of support for the Libyan Jamahiriya revolution in the West, in the Occidental West, that didn't sort of protest, the destruction of Libya, that didn't try to even stop it. In fact, there was a lot of support amongst the left for the imperialist, repression of the Libyan Jamahiriya. I can remember, like one of the leftists, former Trotskyist even, uh, Ellie Kersner, who was a writer for the Now magazine, which was a takeoff from the Trotskyist movement, which became a popular publication, with 100,000 circulation and all that in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So she was one of the invitees, that I brought to Tripoli as a journalist, as a political journalist. And when the German Canadian journalist committed suicide because he got so disenchanted with Libya because of the presence of the fascists from Argentina. He couldn't take, being part of a conference that included fascists because he was German. He was real German, and he was anti-Nazi because he knew, the scourge of what Nazism did to Germany. And he, out of depression, committed suicide. And so, what did the reactionaries claim? They claimed that Libya had killed him because he didn't agree with the presence of the fascists there. But the fascists, we expelled them, like we all expelled the fascists from the conference. So, like if that was the case, with this particular journalist, how come Libya didn't, kill all the rest of us? Because they didn't disagree with us. They agreed with us that the fascists should be expelled, but they wanted to be polite about the invitees, because they were guests. And guests are treated, in Arabic countries, Muslim countries, with a great deal of respect, irrespective of any differences. But nonetheless, we got rid of them. But this one guy, I forget his name, he committed suicide. And Ellie Kersner wrote up, a report saying that it was Libya that had killed him. And so that provided, the psychological rationale for a lack of support for Libya when it came time for the imperialists to try to destroy that regime, and they got away with it, because the left refused to support Libya and even lied about Libya and went along with the propaganda claiming that Gaddafi was a dictator and all that. The left, is pitiful. The left is not a left. you know, I'm leaving. I'm going to go away and find some real revolutionaries elsewhere. This is not the way to go. And it's got to get serious, more serious. And it's not a matter of any particular group. You know, some of the, socialist groupings, are so content with themselves because they've got an increase in membership. And all they care about, is increasing their own membership. And they think that this is, the revolutionary, movement happening because they want to substitute themselves for the revolutionary movement rather than building the revolutionary movement itself. The revolutionary movement is a social movement. It's an intellectual movement of ideas and people who are willing, to mobilize, to implement those ideas. It's not, building a party. I mean, if you want to build a movement, yes, it has to be federated. There are various organizations. Yes, we need organizations, but not, like one organization centralized, that dominates every other organization because they're going to louse it up, because they're only fighting for their own power and not fighting for the power of the people. People's power is a constitutional demarche. I've written up an article about that that's about to be published, in an academic journal. And it's something that can be appreciated. It's appreciated even now, by these academics. So it's this article is up now on the academia.edu website in my Abraham Weisfeld profile. And the name of the article is People's Power in Postmodernism. And its subtitle is A Constitutional Demarche. Not democracy, but demarche. The rule of the people, not the rule of the representatives of the people, but the rule of the people indirect. This is direct democracy. And that's what Libya was proposing. And they called it that, direct democracy. And the Green Book, explains, what the direct democracy is and how it works, with revolutionary committees, etc., and that give the power to civil society as a revolutionary force, independent of a state. So we've got it. We've got the plan. We know what to do. It's a matter of enough people sort of, coming to the focal point of what is the immediate necessity of defending revolutionary initiatives and bringing in other sort of revolutionary tendencies in a federation of force that can actually achieve what it set out to do. That's what I wanted to say here to everyone here and now. And I think that we are doing so here. And our analysis, projects, how it can be done. And we want to bring in other people who can carry out this effort together with us so that we can achieve the necessary transformation to prevent Third World War, to prevent ecocide, to prevent recolonization of all of the colonies that were liberated in the post-war, post-Second World War period, and liberated by the United Nations resolution in 1960 that was sponsored by the Soviet Union on behalf of the independence of all the ex-colonies and all that, which resulted in the uh, increase in the members of the United Nations from 75 to 143 now, together with Palestine. And all those additional sort of members were the former colonies who became independent. And they became recognized in the United Nations because the Soviet Union insisted upon it. So it happened. But now we don't have the Soviet Union anymore. So, each ex-colony can be picked off, one by one, like Venezuela is being done. And that we can allow that to happen. We have to form a new international of revolutionary movements in revolutionary countries that will stop imperialism for good. Uh, I think that's the conclusion to be had. And I think we can conclude on that point there.